All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Will Scott, the chairman of the Annapolis Historic Preservation Commission. On this fourth Thursday of the month, we routinely have an administrative meeting where we are not conducting a public hearing. If members of the public have seen the published agenda and have comments, they may make them online. Could have made them online. They can make them online after hearing what the discussion is this evening, but they are not invited to participate actively during the meeting. So it's really the staff, the commissioners, and any um, uh, entities that are here for a work session with us. And there is, in fact, a significant one this evening. But let's go ahead and begin by calling the roll. Let's just say our names, starting with Cecil, and that'll be easier than calling the roll. Cecil,
Cecil's here.
Mary,
Mary Bannon, hello.
Bill,
Bill Williams.
and of course, I've introduced myself. As I mentioned a moment ago, a quorum is not necessary to act on these administrative items, and I know that at least two members have let me and this office know that they can't attend because of business responsibilities. Anyway, we'll proceed. As usual, I didn't print out the agenda, so I'll wing it a little bit, and I hope that won't inconvenience anyone. John, do you have any announcements or reports on violations that you want to make?
Well, I just want to say that I have met with the owners of 171 Conduit Street. And I have to ask, is anyone else hearing an echo?
I am now,
Yeah, from me.
Yeah. Just from you.
Yeah, I might have to go out and come back. But anyway,
Actually, I think I can fix it.
okay. Anyway, met with the owners of Main Cottage today, and they're going to work on revisions for their denied sign, which is in place. It's a very amicable meeting. In terms of other announcements, a couple of things coming up that I want everyone to be aware of. We have 150 South Street on the agenda. Some of you have seen that project previously, but the approval expired a year and 9 months ago. So they're coming back, and you may be familiar with the applicants. They might actually have something to do with an appendage on a building across the street from you, Mary. But anyway,
Right.
and then also we have possibly, if the reviews are possible, complete from zoning, we may be seeing 114 Duke of Gloucester Street's landscaping, which is a very significant building that is the end of Rideout Row and a very significant yard. So we will see if that makes it through all the different requirements, and it's a little bit dubious at this point because the rear lot has been modified in different ways. For instance, gravel has been put down, and on the site plan for the project, it uses the gravel that is just sort of haphazardly in the soil as established parking. Well, this commission never approved that parking, and there's been a tremendous amount of work vehicle parking on the lot, and I would say the lot is completely denuded of vegetation. Because it may end up with a grading plan.
Hmm.
So I wanted to let you know. We're talking about a colonial building built by Governor Rideout, and we will see how things proceed in the next few days. And I think basically that's it.
Okay. Well,
Oh,
so that really leaves us only with our continued review of the St. Mary's project. And why don't we, Madeline, why don't we promote the representatives so we can begin our discussion with them?
All right, they should all be on in a couple seconds.
Okay, I don't know how many of you are actually going to be participating, but if everyone who is from the St. Mary's team, just introduce yourself, and then I have a few words to set us up for how we'll proceed, okay?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Benjamin Starbuck Wexler. I am an attorney with YVS Law here in Annapolis. And why don't I kind of introduce the panel for everybody's benefit? And
Yes, please.
that may be the most expeditious thing. So I'm here on behalf of St. Mary's Parish as well as the Redemptorist Fathers of New York. With St. Mary's, I have Ms. Pat Mulligan. With the Redemptorist Fathers, I have Mr. Kevin Devine. Also in our team, we're not going to be hearing from everybody today, but Mr. Joe Berg, who's a senior restoration ecologist at Biohabitats, who's the designer of the Shoreline Project. And then two members of the Quinn Evans firm, who's Quinn Evans is serving as the church's cultural resources consultant, Ms. Patty Babin, Director of Preservation Planning, as well as Mr. Dustin Smith, Senior Landscape Architect. And if I've forgotten anyone, please chime in, but I think that's the cast of characters. You'll hear from me this evening and from the cultural resources consultants. If there are other questions, we are here to answer questions and both provide and receive as much feedback as the commission thinks appropriate.
Okay. Well, thank you for those introductions and thank you for your continued participation in the project. Let me just say a few things that I hope will make our meeting more focused and more effective. We all are quite familiar with the project. You've made a number of presentations to us, and it's continued to evolve. We all, I think, agree that it is a project that is caused by the rise in sea level and associated environmental issues. I think, though, that we've reached a point where we're still struggling over agreement upon what is the historic, architectural, and cultural remnants, surviving elements that need to be protected better. And this is, I don't speak for the whole commission, but I think that they will agree with me that we've not yet reached the point where we are entirely satisfied. So I'm going to ask you to address that, at which you seem to be prepared to do. Your report is wonderful, very clear, addresses all of those kind of issues of the environmental and technical aspects of what you want to do. And we're not really debating those. I thought we made it clear at our last session that we understood what you were trying to do in that regard. But I'd like you to concentrate on what you're doing with regard to the historic Carol Seawall and the associated elements of the viewscape. Okay? Sound good?
And Will, if I can just piggyback, I think like to be extremely specific, if I remember correctly, and Eric Groff was kind of the expert here on this, but from a cultural standpoint, I think he just wanted to make sure that somebody who had experience specifically with this historic landscape and there had been a study in the past, we just wanted to see them involved. And then I think There was, questions on the integrity of the wall, like you mentioned, that's buried. And then the third thing I believe was the part of the exposed wall having some type of landmark or some type of, item there to recognize that. And I think those are the three things that were missing. I think everything else was fantastic. So I haven't read everything here. It looks like a pretty long, report. I was going through it, but I think those are the three things that were remaining. And I don't know that we have to go through everything if those three things are covered. But
Cecil, as usual, is very well prepared, and I thank you for that, making it even more specific than what I was saying. And Bill and Mary, unless you have something that you want to add to that brief checklist, I think that we're ready to hear from the applicants.
Cecil, as always, was very thorough, and I appreciate it.
I do
Go back
too.
to you.
Okay.
Great. We will try to stay focused on the historic and cultural resources aspects. I think we heard the
Great.
commission loud and clear from the last meeting, and that's what we're here to talk about. And my role as quarterback of this is to sort of frame the issues, hand it over to Quinn Evans, who actually know what they're talking about. I'm just a lowly dirt attorney and land use attorney. But I guess I will frame the discussion this way. As you all know, this is a project that has been in the queue for a long time. I think as I'm getting up to speed, realize that we've got about 9 years of history, which pales in comparison to the 300 plus years of history of the Charles Carroll House. But we're pushing a decade, and we're dealing with the 1980s breakwater, which is at a point where it's failing, about to fail. It's in poor repair. So there is some urgency in moving this to the public hearing, getting before the port wardens, securing permits, because I think everybody agrees the prospect of a catastrophic failure would be terrible for everyone. So we're prepared to walk through kind of the cultural resources items that you asked for, Mr. Chairman. I would ask that, at the conclusion of this hearing, we have a conversation about how to move this forward expeditiously. Because in a perfect world, we would be under construction. Well, in a perfect world, we'd be under construction several years ago. In today's world, we would love to be under construction to secure and shore up the wall and start undertaking this project as early as the spring. It's a matter of some urgency. It's going to be tight, but obviously for the city of Annapolis and visitors and users of Spa Creek, getting this done sooner rather than later, particularly before the spring and summer boating season, would be our very, very strong preference. But a lot of things need to fall in line for that.
Well,
So-
because you've raised that, let me interrupt you just for a moment to hopefully keep us all on the same page. We on the commission and in the office want to expedite these approvals. We are conscious of the investment of time and money and energy of all parties, ourselves and you or other applicants. So we don't want to delay this unnecessarily, but we have, I think, reached a point where we're not making the necessary progress so that we can say, come in, let's get your final approval and move forward. And it's up to you to get us to that point at this time.
Heard and understood. So without further ado, I'm going to turn over the reins to the Quinn Evans team. And you guys let me know how kind of Dustin, are you going to be taking the lead on this?
Yes, I will be.
Okay. Well, Dustin, I'm going to turn it over to you then.
Yep. Thank you.
Mr. Smith, did you speak to us at the last meeting?
I was not part of that. No.
Okay.
Madeline, can I share, or do you want to drive the slides that we had prepared?
You can certainly share.
Okay. I'm able to do that. Yes.
All right, perfect.
Yep. All right. Well, Mr. Chairman and Commission, thank you all this evening for allowing us to speak on behalf of St. Mary's Parish. And my name again is Dustin Smith. I'm a senior landscape architect, and I specialize in cultural landscapes, preservation planning, and stewardship of historic places. I've done a lot of work with the National Park Service, and I meet the Secretary of Interior standards for trained historical landscape architecture. As mentioned, I'm an employee of Quinn Evans. We're a multidisciplinary architectural firm with works that focus specifically in long-term preservation, sustainability, and stewardship. My work with the firm over the last half a dozen years or so has been focused on the challenges at the nexus of what this shoreline project embodies, which are the preservation and the adaptation of historic places in the face of changing climate conditions. And I'll just say these projects are not easy, and the path to appropriate solutions requires good collaboration and often compromise many times. And so our role is in the memo that you received, and the goal of the study was to develop a foundation for decision making for the elements of the shoreline project that may have impacts on the potential historic features of the landscape. This includes the historic seawall. What we're about to share is not a formal design proposal. Later on, when I describe the resolution actions that mitigate potential impacts to the project, we're talking about alternatives for consideration that require our collective discussion to determine what is most appropriate for this historic place. And so I'll walk you through our methodology, the assessment results, and then the resolution actions. And I just kind of went over the purpose of this study. Our area of study and potential impact is the limits of work boundary for the shoreline project. And so that area on this map is shown in green, the green shaded area within the red dashed line. And that is all the inland zone behind the timber bulkhead that exists there today. But that isn't the only aspect of our study area. Given the location and the setting of the project, and because views and visual relationships are a key characteristic of cultural landscapes, as they are of the Charles Carroll House, we included the 3 view sheds from the 2017 Treatment, Preservation, and Hazard Mitigation Plan study. It should be noted that these view sheds, particularly A and C along Spa Creek Bridge and Compromise Street, do not date to the Charles Carroll period. They do, however, represent views and vistas across the water and from Eastport that would have been potentially significant to the Carroll period. And that's a key rationale for their inclusion in our study. So our methodology for this study, we used established methods for the assessment used by cultural resource managers and agencies reviewing projects with potential impacts to historic resources. This process closely aligns with the Section 106 process, which you may be familiar with. One of the key things about our study, while there is a Maryland inventory of historic properties that exist for the Charles Carroll House, there is no formal document that establishes the historical significance of the landscape. It does not inventory or evaluate its contributing features. However, and nonetheless, there are considerable historical and archaeological research that has been completed in the past that we relied on These studies included the late 1980s archaeological survey, the 2000 site action plan, and the 2017 treatment and mitigation plan, which I've already mentioned. The sources for these are listed at the end of the memo if you need to refer to those. These studies became the basis for our identification of the potential period of significance for the Charles Carroll House, and also the potentially contributing historic features. The contributing features that we identified include the historic seawall as an archaeological resource, the southernmost boxwood hedge and the deciduous trees that are interplanted throughout it, Viewshed B from the upper garden terrace looking south towards Spa Creek, and as previously mentioned, Viewsheds A and C from the water looking back up towards Charles Carroll House with the Annapolis environ in the background. After the establishment of these foundational pieces, we are able to evaluate the potential impacts of the shoreline project and identify the possible resolution actions. And so now I'll turn to the assessment of those impacts. The most critical consideration for our assessment is that the study area within the boundary I showed on the map is non-historic. The land area between the historic seawall and the timber bulkhead is a contemporary modification of the historic property, and it did not exist during the Carroll period. It does not contribute significance to the Carroll Garden landscape. Because of this, and because the land already exists, implementation of the shoreline project does not further diminish the historic aspects of the features that we assessed within that boundary. These included the, as mentioned, the boxwoods, the view sheds, and the seawall. However, the seawall is the one exception where there are potentially adverse effects, and those are due to the planting scheme that was generated by the plans developed by the design team dated March 26, 2025. This is specifically concerning shrub species and their rooting depths that are potentially deeper than 24 inches. There are species that rooting could potentially integrate within historic structural wall mortars and other things like that. We don't know what the current physical condition or structural integrity of the seawall is, so we based our conclusion of adverse impacts on the most conservative assumption possible.
If I could quick ask a question,
Yep.
Dustin, out of curiosity, and I'm not the landscape architect here, but for any mitigation plan that we're looking at here, it's almost, I would imagine almost any planting is going to need to have deep roots, because if it doesn't, then it wouldn't really solve the problem. Is that what I'm understanding? Is like we're going to have to plant something here that's going to be able to hold the land together, and that's going to have to go down with roots, deeper, or are there options otherwise?
I think you're correct. The impacts caused by flooding and the erosive forces due to storm surge and potentially severe storms will cause the land between the timber bulkhead and the historic seawall to subside. So the rooting of planting in that zone is a critical piece of the design that is necessary. Now, what that looks like and how it's designed to be compatible with the historic landscape is something to talk about, and we'll get to that a little bit later.
Since we're already zeroing in, I want to ask a follow-up question. Did you consider at any point exposing the Carroll seawall and using that as the touchstone for what kind of remediation you would proposed to address the sea rise and storm surge problems?
We assessed it based on the current design proposals. And I can turn it over to Joe for this with biohabitats, but exposing the seawall without an understanding of the structural integrity could lead to catastrophic failure of the seawall. And that's something that was likely weighed heavily. So, Joe, do you want to chime in on anything regarding that?
Yeah, that's exactly the way I would think about it,
Yeah.
that you would have to consider what would be the negative impacts and what would be the cost
Right.
in the project to address it and factor that in and share it with us. So your colleague, you were going to have a colleague address that?
Well, yeah, so the designer, Biohabitats, the exposing the seawall had presented no positive opportunities from my perspective as the designer. It could only increase the risk of, making the HPC unhappy. I mean, first of all, we'd have to probably come to you to get permission to expose it. And then we would have to cover it back up in a appropriate fashion. So rather than getting into a buried structure that has been adversely impacted by construction in the past, whether it's land filling in front of it, and having equipment running over it, that was like offered nothing positive for the site and only presented negative risks. So that wasn't part of what we considered as a feasible investigation. The reason that this has come up is the concern about planting, and we've been upfront with the commission in the past that we would like to work through the planting with you. One of the things that we've talked about with Quinn Evans is just maintaining that cool season grass lawn that is mowed on a regular basis is one solution. It's a solution that doesn't present any potential adverse effect on the resource, but it's not, from an ecological perspective, an optimum solution. Strictly from the ecological perspective, salt adapted, like bay plants, that would be adapted to the wetting and the wind-blown salt on their leaves, that would be the optimum ecological solution. But first and foremost, it's about reinforcing the failing bulkhead so it doesn't topple into the water, and then at the risk of having the historic seawall with the relief of all the sediment in front of it follow the same course of toppling into Spa Creek. I'm not sure if I've answered all of your question, but
you've helped me understand how you're proceeding, and I understand, I think, that you're weighing cost and potential damage to the historic seawall, but I do think that you're still not quite focused as we would wish on the viewscape. I mean, how much or what we've seen so far is a dramatic change from what exists today and back further, what exists in Carroll's day, for the purpose of the environmental addressing the environmental problems. Okay. And
Yeah.
Oh, sorry,
and,
sorry,
uh,
Will.
so I'm still feeling, and I want you to finish I don't want to get
Yeah,
this
let's,
going off on all these
yeah.
little sidebars before you finish, because I do think that you've been very thoughtful and very clear in what you're doing. But I'm just saying right now, I'm still seeing an emphasis on sort of this new seawall, if you will, and cost, and not doing what's necessary to preserve the historic situation.
From the last conversation, if I just want to jump in here because Will, I have a slightly different perspective because
Mhm.
I reading through and I don't know if they're going to show this whole thing, but there's a pretty extensive report that was included in the file they gave us from Quinn Evans that really does go into the history of the existing condition, all of the past reports and studies that have been done. And I think from our last conversation, you know, I think as much as we'd love to really understand if that seawall that's currently subterranean can be exposed, it didn't really seem feasible in general, and there's a lot of risk and maybe potentially more risk associated. So I think from our last conversation, we had focused more on the exposed portion and just highlighting that. And then, but to follow up on the comments that you were just making, Joe, in general, I think what I see here is I do see resolutions on the routing and the potential impact of routing. And I think that
Mhm.
there's a lot of
Mhm.
thought put into that, and I appreciate that. And I think from an expediency perspective here, I see this in multiple stages, and this might be helpful to kind of at least get some initial approval. Is, you know, there's the repair of the bulkhead, and then there's all of the plantings and all of the beautification, the cultural landscape that'll be done afterwards that would impact the viewshed. And I wonder if the best way to approach this might be to split this application into multiple parts. And I think maybe Dustin was alluding to that in the sense that we might be able to approve the bulkhead repair to be done pretty quickly and you know, and say, you know, plantings, you know, subject to further, you know, review later at a later date. So that way we don't hold up a whole project for something like that. So I just wanted to add that color here because the report that Quinn Evans pulled together does seem like they had pulled together all of the past studies and really comprehensively considered a lot of these things.
Cecil, I agree with that. I think it's a very fine report that makes it much clearer what they're proposing and making it easier for us to consider and weigh those proposals. I'm not the lawyer, and we don't have our lawyer present with us, so we'll have to get to John in a moment to ask the question. But I don't think we can break it up in that way that you suggested.
We did do that on King George Street. We had all of the landscapes for the plantings to be pushed for further approval at a later date while we still approved a lot of the renovations.
But a much smaller scale with much less impact on the historic fabric.
I do
That's
think
why-
special consideration or dispensation can be given here because I mean I walked this property the other day. I mean this bulkhead could go down with one storm.
Oh,
I mean
no,
it's
no.
so I think special dispensation might be you know useful here or appropriate.
Yes, it would be useful, but I'm not sure that it's the extent of it is something that we can treat in the same way as the good example you just shared. Anyway, Mr. Wexler, I think you wanted to add something?
I'll just add, many of these issues I think are going to be covered in the rest of Mr. Smith's presentation. There are some aspects of particularly interpretive exhibits and materials relating to the cultural landscape that I think fairly will be a work in progress, and it will be a collaborative effort to put together the appropriate signage and the appropriate interpretive regime so that visitors to this area really can understand the full cultural resources impacts and the location of the wall, historically where things are, as well as the non-contributing features between the historic seawall and the bulkhead. So I'd suggest maybe let's have Quinn Evans kind of go through the rest of their presentation, and then we can kind of talk about phasing and what kind of further discussion would be helpful for the HPC.
Excellent. Let's do that.
Great. Yeah, I'll jump right along here. I don't need to belabor this slide very much, as you noted in the beginning. There are a lot of potential benefits to a living shoreline project like this, specifically for historic resources. And where time is of the essence, the imminent risk of leaving the resource unprotected is not recommended, and it could lead to damage, destruction, and even loss. And so we're seeing the expected rise in sea levels by 2050 to go up 6 to 12 inches. As you're probably well aware, high tide flooding or sunny day flooding is occurring far more frequently, and storm surge levels are going to go up as well. And so there's a need for this to protect the greater landscape of the Charles Carroll House, not just the historic seawall, but the landforms that occur at higher elevations. That the topography and the grading of the gardens is an essential characteristic of the landscape, and those become at risk due to the types of flooding and storm events that could potentially occur. So I'll jump here to the resolution actions, and I think this gets to the chunk that you all want to hear about is how do we move forward? How do we address not only the seawall, but what the planning condition looks like? And so one potential option here is planting that preserves visual compatibility. And the goal of this approach is to maintain the current visual continuity between the garden terraces, the landscape north or higher at elevation above the historic seawall, to preserve that continuity with the area between the seawall and the bulkhead. So today it's predominantly a lawn landscape, and it doesn't need to remain lawn. As we noted before, the characteristics of the planting that is proposed should help mitigate the effects of erosion and subsidence. And so lawn is probably not the most appropriate vegetation to go back in, but there are things that look like lawn that maintains the green level aesthetic, the consistent kind of ground plane aesthetic. And so that is the intent of this first potential action. And so this next slide, I will caution you, these are photos. These are not proposed concepts or design. They're examples of some of the qualities and the characteristics that may be appropriate. And so you see here ground plane of mix of perennial species that have the aesthetic generally of a continuous green lawn landscape, and they're going to be saltwater tolerant. They're not going to get too high and unwieldy. It's going to be compatible with what's there today.
Let me just ask a question that might be
Sure.
a little narrow and picayune, but isn't this kind of when we think of a lawn today, we think of a lawn as cut grass such as already exists. But in the 18th century on a British country estate, wouldn't something like this be what you would actually see in the distance from a country house?
Yeah, absolutely right. Meadows of this quality and character would have been part of that landscape.
Yeah, I think when I saw this slide, I was hoping that that's what you were headed towards.
Yep, that's correct.
Thank you. Please continue.
Yes, thank you. So this is alternative 1. Alternative 2 is the goal of this approach is to preserve the historic character, and it's to preserve the character of the landscape above the historic seawall. As noted before, the land that we're talking about between the seawall and the timber bulkhead is non-historic. And so the goal of preservation planning is often to clearly distinguish what's historic from non-historic. And to do that, you design it in a way that actually doesn't look like the Carroll period landscape. It still should be compatible with the visual characteristics of the landscape, but it shouldn't look like it necessarily belonged there when Mr. Charles Carroll lived there. And so in this scheme, we're preserving the visual characteristics of the lawn, but we're using greater flexibility in the planting scheme. And so again, these photos represent a much more contemporary waterfront edge. There is some formality in the groupings and the arrangement, and all of that can get worked out in the final design plans by the design team. But this provides you some visuals of the mixes and the ecological benefits of those mixes that could occur in this space. And so this is saying specifically that the space that is planted is different. It's of a contemporary landscape. It is not of the historic landscape. And finally, we spent a fair bit of time on the historic seawall and the interpretation of the historic seawall. And I want to circle back to the idea of uncovering it. One of the key issues and risks of doing that, aside from the fact that it is too short to function to today's flooding elevations, to reconstruct or to add on to that wall decreases the actual historic integrity of the seawall. So it no longer is a fair representation of what was out there during the Charles Carroll period. Once you change that wall, either in the materials or the height or the the width, whatever you have to do to make it function, it's no longer of clear integrity to the period of significance. And so this specifically led us to the idea that interpretation of the seawall would be the most appropriate form of educating and preserving the seawall and the landscape.
If I might add in, I think that is a very cool idea, the tower viewer and stuff. So I don't know the feasibility of that, but in terms of city, but I think that's a very cool idea.
Yeah, I think that's a point well taken also.
Yeah. So
You mean putting something on the Spa Creek Bridge, which is Maryland Highway Administration? I'm just saying
coordination.
That's not a simple task.
Well, nobody said it was simple.
No, I'm saying it's way more.
I just said it was cool. Very cool.
Right.
Yeah. Just tell State Highway it's pretty cool and they'll say yes.
Sorry?
Just tell State Highway it's pretty cool and they'll say yes.
Cecil, you'll be heading up that viewer, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
But that's not the only option. Okay, so there's things that can be done on the property itself to interpret the seawall, and one of the most conventional forms is a wayside sign, and these are used quite often and can present a fair bit of educational information. And so the image on the left kind of shows you what that may look like, and the image on the right is pretty cool in the fact that it uses overlays of photographs to show the change in the landscape. So you can kind of see what's faded in the background in gray and is actually the historic image of that building, of that structure there. And what the piece that is in front is what's there today. So you could effectively do this with the the historic seawall, and you would want to do this probably after the living shoreline is constructed. So it's a great representation of the current condition versus the historic condition. And so these are all ideas about what that wayside could look like that could get worked out in discussions afterwards.
Have you had any connection, made any contact with the team that's working on the city dock, the placemaking and historical marking of that project?
I have not. No.
They are nearing a point where they will want to make a presentation publicly on exactly these issues. And so I'm just throwing that out as something you might want to try to observe and see how that is received and comes through the process. It might be a help in even integrating in some way, if this is the path that we choose together to go here.
I was going to add, having some level of coordination with the city dock project obviously is going to be necessary given the construction, but also in the historic interpretation, there would be something to be said for having continuity in signage and interpretation throughout the waterfront.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, great. So we've mentioned the tower viewer. This is some quick photos of what that could look like. They're pretty neat, but it does take coordination, and it will take a concerted effort to do something like that. Again, a similar idea with the fact that you could look through one of these things and see, side by side or overlaid images of the historic visual characteristics of the Carroll period landscape, as well as the current day aesthetic and qualities. And last but not least, there's also physical ways to represent the seawall on the surface of the ground. And these are just two examples of what could be done and designed that kind of show the historic alignment of the seawall, and it represents the place in which it was part of the landscape during the Carroll period. And there could also be integration of educational pieces here, where on the left-hand side you have some text etched into bricks and other things like that. The one on the right is a little bit more subtle. It may take a combination with a wayside to tell the story. And so these are some ideas that could be discussed and fleshed out by the team.
Yeah. To me, it's very encouraging that you do have these kinds of ideas out there that you can deal with. And may I assume that there are other alternatives that you could or have considered that would accomplish these goals?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are, next steps where, essentially presenting what we feel is our appropriate options for this group to weigh in on and provide feedback, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. Okay.
That is it for me.
Mr. Wexler, are there other members of your team that are going to make any kind of formal presentation?
I think that's going to be it. I think we're all here to collaborate, to discuss, to talk about next steps. So I think let's have just an open forum and get some feedback from what you guys heard, what you liked, what you didn't like, and then talk about where we go from here.
Well, our normal procedure at this moment would be ask for the staff to give their input about what has been presented in the report and this evening, and then for the commissioners to talk about how they've responded to everything that's been set up until that point. Okay, so John, you want to weigh in?
So, yeah, I think that this represents progress. I also want to underline something here, though. We're not really talking about the possibility of creating the living shoreline. I think that that is essentially a given at this point. So what is important is the interpretation of the cultural landscape. I think there were some good ideas. You know, the viewfinder from the bridge, that's going to be tricky. Have you looked at a spot for that? And the reason I say it is because it sounds good, but you know, is there actually a place on that narrow sidewalk or near the bridge keeper's house where it could go? Were you thinking of adding a plate to the railing and mounting it on that?
I would suggest that there's a better tool for that. It's not, I don't like those things in general. They become objects that catch more attention than they deserve. But we all carry around this wonderful little device in our pockets now. And you know, they can be cued to markers, say, you know, you punch in this and you get that report, including visuals. I
Well,
would suggest something like that.
I agree. I agree. And so Dustin, if you put signage up that at the base of the bridge, the city doesn't own the bridge. I think the city paints the bridge. We maintain it in some way. But we do own the cast iron fence that is by the little beach at the base of the wall. So you could design for that possibly. Signage.
I think that's
Right.
pretty flexible. You know,
Right.
you only
Well,
need
Yep.
you only need
so
a medallion.
we want to get to an approval.
Yeah.
But what we're still discussing concepts.
Yeah. Well,
And I can't approve concepts in a staff report.
right.
So-
Well, let's hear from the other commissioners. I want to say that I think great progress has been made too. And I think we've gotten over that, talking about all of the environmental elements, which are not really under our purview, nor are we really qualified to make a pass or fail grading on stuff like that. I think we're now into where we ought to be.
Well, before we move on, I want to say that vegetative approaches sound good, but they won't be maintained. In 5 years, the reason for it will be forgotten, which is a problem. And I have some familiarity with the maintenance of Charles Carroll House. So I think that something that is physical is probably a stronger and more permanent way of let's say interpreting the seawall. And the way that I see the bulkhead is essentially the equivalent of vinyl siding on a landmark colonial structure. And so now we're going to make it permanent. It's going to be the permanent shoreline for that. So the elevation of the actual seawall behind it, I think, is paramount to making this a successful project.
If I may jump in again, I'm sorry guys, I know I spoke a bunch. I'm gonna have to put a baby to sleep here in a second. But I'm gonna have to jump off early. But I wanted to share just a couple of high level thoughts and reviews. So first and foremost, on this presentation, they didn't include the full report, thank goodness, because we don't want to see the whole report on presentation. But if you guys haven't already, other commissioners, I think that Quinn Evans knocked it out of the park in terms of combining all of the past studies, really doing the research on everything that everybody said in the past. And I think that was one thing that we really wanted to see, is that kind of culmination of everything that's been discussed over the decade and beyond. I think they did a great job of talking about the history and the problems and the potential solutions. And so I think in terms of an assessment and a feasibility of everything that could happen, I do think that they knocked it out of the park on that. I think from our last meeting, when they discussed all the technical components of rebuilding that seawall, there was a couple of different options, but I think for the most part there was a consensus that was appropriate. Vinyl, to that point on the bulkhead, John, I get that, but we're also at a day and time where, you know, we have to do what's best for the long term, and maybe there's a way that we can
Oh,
hide that or
I
mitigate
agree.
that.
I agree.
And then in terms of you know, the signage and things like that, I love the ideas that you guys have for the signage. I love the tower view, and I love marking the seawall. To John's point, something that requires extra approval through state highway might not be feasible, but maybe a sign on the Annapolis Yacht Club side of the bridge and maybe a sign on the Iron Gate. I do love QR codes, but I think there should be a sign that shows everything in the examples you have, because as we move into an age of just more digital and technology, QR codes are phenomenal, but can be you know, can also be used for phishing and things like that. And I don't think there should just be a QR code for that reason. People aren't going to scan it if they don't understand everything else about what they're scanning first. And I do think a lot of people walk around and don't want to have to pull out their phones, but if they can, that's a great option. And I think just installing signs there, if we can't do something else on those iron gates on both sides of the bridge, could be really useful. And then in terms of the plantings and whatnot, if there's a way that we can tier the approvals where the bulkhead gets approved and then the plantings get discussed later, I know that might not be possible, but if we aren't at a consensus for the plantings and how those are done, I don't think that it's appropriate to let that hold up the entire project. Because if we are, I mean, I walked it. I mean, this site is times of the essence. You guys said that, everybody knows that. If there's a way that we can break those up, if we don't have a consensus on plantings, I think that's a really important path forward. And then on the maintenance of it all, I think if that really is a concern, then maybe what we should have is as a part of the application, there should be a maintenance plan that would be adhered to. So anyway, those are all my comments, but the overall, I do think that you guys hit the nail on the head for a lot of what we're looking for here. I'm not the landscape architect, Eric is, so he would have to comment a lot more on the specifics of the cultural landscape and the plantings, but from my untrained, you know, perspective on that, I think that you guys delivered what I was looking for. So thank you for all that, and I do think it's feasible. So
So
I am
Thank
gonna have to
thank
cut
you,
out,
Cecil. Thank
but-
you for getting so many clear thoughts in so quickly. And I know you have to leave, but remember that the bottom line for this work session is, do we think this is feasible to move forward? So you want to just give a yay or nay? I think I know what you're going to say. Yay?
Yes, I do think it is. Yeah.
Okay, good. Mary, did you want to
Thank you
add
all.
anything?
I just want to mirror some of what Cecil said. I think that the report, which I did read, and I appreciate you not presenting that as well, but it was really fascinating to me.
Yeah,
I mean,
very good.
I've been coming to Annapolis for 40 years and I was not aware of all of this history, and I don't know that many people are. So I love the idea of the signage and the QR code. I love the idea that you all showed of like maybe recreating the original seawall just on the top of the, so people would know where it was. I thought that was really clever. John, I wanted to ask you, what did you think of the version 1 of planting to sort of mimic turf, and version 2 to clearly differentiate that was not the original?
Well, I like the idea in concept, and actually, I thought it was aesthetically, it sounds great. But what
Version 1 or version 2?
Any differentiation
Okay.
of that space,
Yeah.
it's a good idea, but I think it's really important because everyone needs to understand the reason we are where we are is because there was no maintenance.
Yeah.
That seawall was not maintained. It wasn't repaired. And it's hard, I think, for people 10 years from now to know what the decisions are regarding, let's say, specific plantings. It may not be relevant in 10 years. It's not a park.
Right.
So that really worries me. I don't want it to end up not being
Yeah.
interpretive. But I think it's a great idea. In a certain place, it might work. In a national park, it could work. At St. Mary's, I don't think I really have serious doubts.
Who is responsible for the maintenance of the seawall and then the land right
Well,
there?
it changes. So whoever is, it's the
Redemptorist Brothers, isn't it?
Yeah, it was the Redemptorists. There was a group that was overseeing it, but they
Well, I
would
think
fall.
here, John, we're getting into an area where this isn't what we need to focus on tonight, because first of all, as you mentioned a moment ago, these are only broad proposals of the kinds of things that are possible. This isn't their final application, and we can wrestle this
Well,
down to the ground with.
well, I agree. I agree, and I don't mean to be short, but this has been kicked around for 9 years. So, Dustin, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're working on this. I'm glad you're thinking about it. I appreciate your creativity. I'm trying to get this over the goalpost
Yeah.
because I've been to every one of these meetings.
So have I think. But to that point, I think we're getting close to that point where we moved a lot closer tonight. And Mr. Smith, I think your contributions were crucial to that. But Bill, do you want to say anything else before I sort of try to wrap this up?
If you don't mind.
Please.
I like the plantings. I like the idea of the plantings, but we don't have an arboretum here. What we have is basically pretty much a privately owned green space. And if the grounds crew gets lazy, not the grounds crews get lazy, they will mow it accidentally.
Oh, it's a given. That's a
I
given.
mean, it's going to go. So whatever goes down there, if we're going to mark the wall, it has to be at least semi-permanent so it's not as destructible.
Yeah.
As far as the tower viewer, I think it's a good gimmick. I don't think there's room on the bridge for it. And in general, I think it will be another attractive item that our epidemic of stickers will be attacked with.
But do you think this is a feasible project? Then we
I
should tell them
think
to
it's
go
a
forward.
feasible project.
Good. And Mary, I think that's what you were saying too.
Yes, I think it's feasible.
Yeah, I think that compared to what we saw in our last few meetings, this has been a giant leap forward, and I think it's quite feasible. And I think we've been pretty clear on the areas that we would like you to give the most attention and thought to as you come in for a formal application. Good? You agree? Mr.
So-
Wexler, your team?
I think we've got a lot of good feedback. So we'll take this back and do some work. And think we would be very happy to move forward with the public hearing.
So I want to
Wait a
be the
minute,
voice
John,
of
wait a minute, John,
reality
John.
here.
John, wait. Mr. Wexler, for you and your team, what I think I'm trying to say for the commission is that the earliest you could possibly be on, if you got all of the necessary materials ready, would be March, but more likely April. I mean, March would be, we're already have a pretty full agenda for our public hearing meeting in March. So I don't know if we could accept that.
So this is the voice of reality. So you have 1 month to 1 month at close of business on this Thursday, 1 month from today, to get in the application. My suggestion would be, and I don't know that there's necessarily time, but my suggestion would be to try to also work on another pre-application prior to the public hearing itself, so that this discussion can occur again, so that when it comes to public hearing, you'll have fewer instances of, oh, well, why don't we do this? Or maybe we could do that, that you actually have something that could be voted on and approved. I'm only saying this to try to move things forward, but it's a fairly short period of time.
To respond to that, it is a short period of time, and as time goes on, the risk of catastrophic failure goes up. And in the event of a catastrophic failure, we're going to end up with a seawall that is that's a Band-Aid, and that's what we're desperately trying to avoid as well. So I hear you. I think we need to sort of talk about that internally, but I think our desire is to get a public hearing scheduled as quickly as possible, and we will do everything within our power to present a full and complete package that is approvable.
Okay, well, I think this has been a very successful meeting, and I want to thank Ms. Mulligan and Mr. Wexler and the other gentlemen for getting that together for us. And I think we're on the same page now. We're ready to go and see what you put together after this meeting. Okay?
Thank you all for your time this evening.
Thank
Yeah.
you all.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Well, I don't think there's anything else for us to do.
Oh, yes, there is.
Commissioners?
Yes,
Huh?
there is. Yes.
John?
Boom. Damn, Will. All right. So I want everyone to know. Oh, this is just internal
Yeah,
administration.
the members of the team from St. Mary's, there's no
Right.
reason you should put yourself through this.
Yes. Okay.
But you
So
can if you want.
no,
What?
no, do not.
What?
Do not invite them into this
No,
aspect.
no, I said there's no
our
reason they
meeting.
should put themselves through this.
Hold
That's-
on. They're still in the meeting.
So what do you want them to
I'm
do?
moving them to the attendee list. It might just take a second.
Okay.
Okay. So when I got back from vacation,
Okay, there, wait, we still have a member of the St. Mary's team present. Madeline, we all squared away?
Yeah, working on it. You're still live though.
well, it's okay to be live.
Okay, cool. Just
Yeah.
Right. So when when I got back from vacation, underway without my knowledge or consent was a rewriting of our guidelines. It's the HPC guidelines, and that was principally to change the guidelines so that they could be accessible to sight impaired users on our website. No problem with it, but I had no idea that it was a process underway. So the full staff is now addressing that. And I think that in a subsequent meeting, possibly March, I may distribute some of the edits. And I think that that would be worthwhile so that everyone on this commission knows that changes are being made to our online presence. And I think that it would be important for everyone to review these, and I think it would be important to vote on them. You
I
know,
think,
whether they're
John,
approvable.
by the way, for the other commissioners, John and I talked about this yesterday and today. Anyway, John made me aware of it. It is a concern that something like this could even be initiated without our awareness. And this is part of a larger issue that I am trying to get a meeting with the mayor to discuss this whole scenario. Let me just put it that way. But we'll proceed as John suggested, because at the moment, that's the only option that we've been given.
Is
So
it
just-
to offer like visual description of the page? Can you explain what it
Mary,
is?
that is very astute. For instance, here's the for
Yeah.
instance. Well, there's also reformatting and you know, we do have some possibilities for updating some things too. It just has to happen on an accelerated schedule. However, so let's say there's a description of a sign at the Maryland Inn. You know, it's the equivalent of this is an approvable sign. And what it's going to be is a sign at the Maryland Inn hangs on a
Right.
metal arm with two brackets that are mounted into mortar joints. So it's much more
Right.
descriptive.
I've worked with visually impaired people. That was part of my career. So I'm very familiar with web pages being rewritten for visually impaired viewers.
So it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. The only bad thing was that it was occurring without my knowledge.
Right, of course. And you should be able to approve it all before it goes live for sure.
And that's what I'm trying to address too. But I also I created programs at the National Gallery for the visually impaired.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it's a high priority. It's very important. I'm surprised we haven't done anything like this yet, but it's this whole issue of things happening
Yeah,
that
you have no
profoundly
idea.
affect our commission and its operation without our even being aware that it's happening.
Plus, if it's not done correctly, then it's terrible. You
Yeah.
know, if
Oh,
it's
yeah.
so.
It might not be an improvement, but
Yeah.
you know, all of HPC staff is working on it. So I think we'll have a good outcome, and it will be presented to the commission.
Okay.
Good. All right. Anything else?
Minor thing for those who might be interested, and this is really an announcement. It seems as though we are going to in the near future, let's say, how should I put this? Give the Maynard Burgess House greater interest. HPC is applying for a grant. I think the mayor's office is showing interest in getting matching funds for a grant for work on the exterior of the building, which is overdue. We're right at the edge of the difference between a major project and a stabilization project. There's some repair that needs to be done, but the building's never been dedicated since its renovation, and now is the time. So I think that that's going to happen, and I hope that everyone will look forward to that as a positive contribution to the historic district for a building that sits there humbly but with fortitude.
Yeah. And I'll just make a brief announcement. I think some of you may have read in the paper that the Art Public Places Commission was abolished by Mayor Lidman. That sounds very harsh. Some of you perhaps do know that it's been a troubled commission, although a very worthwhile purpose. Its operation has been difficult. But this is part of the mayor's intention to revisit all boards and commissions in the city. In this case, the review and recommended course of action is being led by April Nyman, the executive director of the County Arts Council. It's hard for me, in my experience, to think of a better person to do this that will create a better outcome. But I just want you to know that I think this will mean that at some point we're going to be looked at that way. And I don't know whether it's going to involve talking to individual commissioners or just chairs or just staff or some combination. I don't know what the form is yet. That's one of the things I want to talk to the mayor about. So more when I have more information to share.
Maybe we're all going to get raises.
Yes, that's right. I think we're going to get coffee once a month.
I heard they were going to double our salary.
Woo!
I think each of you is going to get a bag of potato chips.
Well, they better be Old Bay potato chips.
Definitely.
Okay, well, I hope you all survived this snow on Monday.
Oh, don't say it. 4-letter word.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank
Night
you.
all.
You all have a good weekend. See you next time.
Bye. You too.
Bye.
Thank you, Madeline.